Live pictures here from stage 16 of the Vuelta España. It's rapidly coming to an end. And just less than a week now to go. The big test will come in the mountain time trial on stage 20. There is Vicente Garcia Costa. Just to let you know exactly what's happening, if you have just caught up with us, there are two men up the road. Walter Pedraza of Tinkoff Credit Systems, and also with him is Jesus Rosendo, the first wearer of the Mountains classification jersey here in this year's Vuelta España. They were allowed to build up a lead very, very quickly. They had about 7.5 minutes, and then Paolo Bettini decided enough was enough. I'm going to try and shut that down a bit, and dragged the peloton along a little faster. They've chopped that lead down to about 4 minutes now. Now, the average speed for the first 2 hours was 28 kilometers an hour, to which our French colleague Patrick Chassé said, even I could cycle with a peloton today. I could be in the break. Maybe he could. Ah, look, he's the chap from America has replaced his eagle wings with very large antlers. I tell you what, he could cause a great deal of trouble if he tripped over with those, couldn't he? Especially near the peloton. It's not a nice thought. Jesus Rosendo and Walter Pedraza, both of whom had a good old crack at the Mountains classification early on. But since then they've been fairly quiet indeed. Pedraza there from Tinkoff, 26 years of age now, and got a good third place, good podium place in the Tour of Burgos. Nice to see a little bit of banter and light-hearted humour between Alejandro Valverde and Carlos Sastre. The other man in the breakaway, by the way, Rosendo, is also 26. And I think the best result he's got so far this season is 9th on stage 5 of the Tour Andalusia. That was right at the beginning of the year. And, of course, wore the Mountains classification jersey here in the Vuelta. It was a pretty pedestrian pace earlier today, Sean. 28 kilometers an hour for the first 2 hours of racing. And they are really not that bothered today.
Nobody really attacking, so they just really just tour the foot, and it hasn't been any better really since, because it was the second there. We haven't been doing great things, and it's just upping a bit in the last 28 kilometers average for a second there, so they're really taking over easy today. It's almost a rest day for a lot of the riders, but the circumstances as well, with 2 riders out in front, and they never allowed to take a big advantage, and that is quite easy to control. And it looks like we're going to see a big sprint today, a big sprint, which is a surprise, I suppose. When you look at the route today, you would say, well, another day for one of these breakaways, because there's so many riders and so many teams that it hasn't got what they came here for, to get some exposure of the race, and you would expect more of them to go on that. I think in the team briefings in the morning, the night before, the manager would be saying, if you haven't got the legs, you're really suffering, and you're not recovering, then it's a hard thing to do.
Well, these two men went out this morning, and the lead has been chopped down thanks to the work of Paolo Bettini, in fact, getting on the front and chopping the gap down from near 8 minutes down to about 4.5, and they're just happily within reach now. Jesus Rosendo making sure he can get some food inside him. Well, yesterday's win by David Garcia is the first in a big tour. There he goes. Obviously sponsored by a well-known magazine in the United States of America. I really hope you don't fall over. What do you think of these guys when you see these guys at the side of the road show? What do you think as a rider?
Well, we don't really take much notice. You know that they are riding a lot, as we can see. The way they're playing those are a big push. I suppose you just like to see that being guys and the rest of it. There's certainly today that's something to the race because it is boring. For viewers first of all, and for the riders it's really a boring day because just waiting there and time, the kilometres are coming down so slow. Little things like that, it just passes a bit of time as we just explained.
That is such a fantastic shot. Pedro Aurelio was the guy who rode off with his flag. It's no good waving your arm in the air saying, hey, what about my flag? You're daft enough to run alongside with a pair of antlers almost the size of your torso on it. Oh, terrific. Look, Aurelio's ambushes him. Here we go, look, watch. Wallop! Wait, give me my flag back. Oh, good one. I like it. That's what we like to see. Brings some enlivening entertainment to what is essentially a pretty dull day, as Sean was saying. Well, he gets himself on television. That's what he wants. The oxygen of publicity. The particular bicycle magazine that's sponsoring him. Cool bicycle. Obviously there, or he's got the gear on anyway. Even if they're not sponsoring, they should be extremely happy. They couldn't pay for that sort of exposure on the Vuelta a España. There we go. Back to some more sensible thoughts. There is Alberto Contador and Carlos Sastre having a good old chat. We were talking just before those shots came up about the Jacobo Galicia squad and David Garcia's win yesterday. The previous win that they'd had. It's the first really big win they've had. But as a team, their first win was back in July 2007 with Eladio Jimenez winning in the Trofeo Joaquim Agostino a long time ago, and he won 2 stages in the Vuelta Portugal at the same time. They have had a few wins, but they've all been fairly small. The biggest win they'd had to date until yesterday was the Tour of Turkey, also by David Garcia, and that was this year in April. Well, talking of Galicians, it's probably a good time to put forward a question to you today. Galicians, let's have a look at they. Galicians have featured from very early on in the Vuelta a España, and what I'm really interested in knowing is, if we can find the question I'd put together, is that two very famous Galicians were involved actually in some of the biggest gaps, largest time gaps in the final classification in the history of the Vuelta. In fact, there are 2 in the top 5, and I wonder if you could tell me who they are. The Galicians, they are Galician riders. It's a long time ago now. 2 Galician riders involved in the longest time gaps in the final classifications. 2 of them are in the top 5. It'd be even better if you could tell me what the gap was between first and second. We're talking about who won and was second, and what that time gap was. So that would be interesting if you can come up with that answer on a day that's just going to roll along. Your questions and comments quite welcome on eurosportcycling@hotmail.fr. Apologies for the lack of sound that we had earlier, just a technical problem with the host broadcasters. We seem to be back and up and running and okay now. Well, it's a quiet day all round, to be honest, Sean. It's quiet in the race. It's been pretty quiet in the papers as well. There's not a huge amount going on. We've talked about Carvin Galicia turning to Jacobo Galicia, and we've talked about Nick Noyens. Noyens still thinking he could make the Belgian squad for the World Championships, but they haven't announced that yet at all. They're keeping their cards, playing their cards very close to their chest, the Belgians.
Well, it's amazing, the big cycling nations, they wait a long time to build their team. And the French, they're still playing the Belgians, of course, and their teams in the last 2 days. So the smaller nations in the team before the Tour of Britain finished their league, which is a situation which I cannot understand, because we have only 3 riders riding in the league holders, and it's like the race before.
That's crazy, really, isn't it?
Yep. You have to wait and see who's the man on form, is it coming to shape, and if you do the performance like in the Tour of Britain this week, and then they're the ones who has to it goes for all countries. Essentially, I think the Belgians are generally right, they're waiting to men in this week. And of course, there's always the 4 or 5 top guys who are in there that are sure get their place. But the last number of places, they're always you have to fight for your place. You have to move your own shape.
Yeah, Nick Noyan's showing he's got some sort of form. Possibly a little bit steep for him, that last hill of the day. But he says he is in good form. He's secret of champion, which I'm not sure I'll go down with the rest of the Belgians. Well, more sound problems by the sound of it. Quite a few people writing in on Eurosport Cycling at hotmail.fr saying they can't hear Sean. I can hear him here. I'm wondering whether we've still got a sound problem. I'm trying to communicate with the engineers. My apologies if some of his answers are not coming through, or any of his answers are not coming through. Miguel Fernandez, he was on the floor the other day. A rider we hardly ever see except in Spanish races. And has had some very good rides for Cofidis in the Vuelta a España in the last few years. You always just see him up in the mountains. He's been less active this time around. Serafim Martinez been in a couple of breaks for. He's still got Carpin on his jerseys there, Sean. That's interesting, isn't it? Maybe they haven't had time to make up new ones, but he's still got Carpin. Maybe Carpin are still a minor sponsor. I actually don't know the answer to that, but the Jacobo are the main sponsors. Galicia are the main joint sponsors. Jean Guerderet. But still wearing Carpin on the side of the jerseys. They only got taken over by the Jacobo as a main sponsor in August. How long does it take to get all this sort of stuff turned around?
Well, it can take a bit of time. It depends on your clothing manufacturer.
And your budget as well, yeah.
And your budget, of course. But if you change from a sponsor, you have got a new budget, and you certainly have to include that in the sponsorship deal. And it should not take a long time to get it done over. Especially for a race, like the Tour of Spain, you have only a number of riders, so you can get it done quite quickly. And this time of year is not a major difficult time. Beginning of the year, of course, all the manufacturers are really busy getting clothing for all the Pro Tour teams and the amateur teams. So it's a good time of year, I think, if you have to get new clothing with new sponsorship on board made up. But it's surprising to see some of them there with the Carpin still on their jersey.
Somebody else younger enjoying the Vuelta a España? My apologies if it's difficult to hear us today. We have had some sound problems. We have quite a few emails on eurosportcycling@hotmail.fr just to say you can't hear Sean. Keep those coming in to say if you can or can't, because in the commentary box it sounds fine to us, so it's very difficult to tell, unfortunately. Thanks, Richard in Windsor in the UK, saying I've seen the guy with the antlers makes him laugh. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen in any bike race?
Well,
there's all sorts of funny things do happen, isn't
yes,
it? Horses running up and down the middle are quite odd. I mean,
yes, well, that is just one of the most crazy, sometimes I suppose you call it dangerous things, when you see people coming along and riding beside the bunch with a horse or with a number of horses, and of course the horse gets scared, and then they have problems controlling a horse, and it turns into a problem. We've seen it a few times, but also of course the loose horses, they're the really most dangerous, because when they get going, if they get fright, they can be very dangerous. But the crazy things, of course, the mountains we talked about the other day, like that is, I suppose, for a bike rider, that is one of the crazy situations, because you have people, spectators who are on the climb maybe for many hours and having a few drinks, and then when the riders come along, we see it in the Tour of France, and we see it just 2 days ago in this race, and it's certainly a frightening situation as a rider, because they're out there in front of you and you're on the limit, and you're just hoping that they will stand out of the way, just move out of the way as you come by. And I always, as a rider, and more so as a spectator now, I just always a bit scared that there don't be more accidents in those situations.
Yeah, do you remember in the Tour de France 2 or 3 years ago? I think it might have been a bit more actually. The guy, the mountain biker, who was obviously into his trick mountain biking and taking big air and jumps and things, actually jumped over the top of the peloton from one field to another. Do you remember that? Some guy came flying over the top of the peloton one day as Walter Pedraza tries to get off the front with Rezondo in his wheel. He came flying over. He was all dressed in black, I remember, all with his black helmet on and so on. He came flying over the top of the peloton across a road, you know, right over the top. That was pretty unusual. Didn't expect that to happen. Of course, lots of crazy things happen outside of the Tour itself. You don't often see them on the cameras. But what about do you remember the Czech guy who was pedaling around 3 or 4 years ago when we were on the Tour on what people would call an ordinary or a penny farthing? And he was doing the mountains descents as well as going up on this great big thing, and he was unbelievably fit. He was doing the entire route.
Yes, well, I suppose outside of the event, which we do not maybe see or have a chance to see it, but certainly driving the route the night before actually it was, and he was going down the final descent of the day, and we did stop and we talked to the car that was following on, and he said he was riding all the route, every kilometre, which is amazing on a penny farthing. And the climbs going up first of all, but going down, I could not understand how he could do it all, but it seemed to be the case that he was after riding the full route of the Tour de France.
Absolutely, he just takes his feet off. And it was we have to emphasise it was a modern bike. It was built from new, and it had sort of custom-made rubber on it, and also had pretty good caliper brake on the front as well. But even so, bit of a bizarre and crazy thing to do, I think. But boy, Gilmy looked fit. He really did. It's taking riding fixed wheel to its absolute extreme, isn't it? Nothing much going on in the Vuelta a España today. It's stage 16 from Ponferrada to Zamora, 186.3 kilometres. If you've seen anything absolutely balmy on a tour, Eurosport Cycling at hotmail.fr is the address to write into. In the news, we've talked about Nick Noyens. Go on, young man. Make sure you don't get your flag caught in your rear wheel. That's something that we saw in Paris-Roubaix a few years back. I think it was Leif Hoster, in fact, or it might have been Stein de Vold, I can't remember. Leif Hoster, I think, who got his rear wheel caught up with a Flandrian flag, and the most fantastic piece of bike handling at that time. It wasn't very nice conditions. The flag wrapped itself around the rear wheel and locked up the rear wheel completely.
Yes, and it was at a very important point in the race. It was getting towards the end, and they were really going full bore at the time, and he just the flag just went to his rear wheel, and it certainly cost him a bit of time to stop, get it out, and when you're really the final of the Paris-Roubaix in the last 30-40 kilometres, it's a disastrous thing to happen, and it knocks first of all it knocks you out of the position you're in. You have to fight your way back, and it can have a huge difference on your outcome of your result in the race.
Has anybody got an answer to the question today? Yep. The largest time gaps in the final classification. In the top 5, historically in the Vuelta a España, 2 Galicians, this is the link obviously with yesterday, with Jacob Galicia. 2 Galicians feature in the top 5 of largest time gaps at the last day of the finish of the Vuelta a España. If you can name them, the years and the distance, that would be absolutely brilliant. If anybody's got that there. It's a scorching hot day again here on the Vuelta a España. I don't know if anybody saw the end of the Tour of Poland on Eurosport 2. What a scrappy old sprint that was. And once again, Gerald Cielek missing out by being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The reason I mention that is that his teammate at Colombia, Andre Greipel, not very happy to be left out of the German squad. And I'm a bit surprised, to be honest, because he's been consistent all the way through the year, and he can get up the hills.
Yes, well, of course, it's a familiar case at the moment, as the riders always not happy with the situation, and the German squad, once again, they would have quite a good number of riders capable of doing a performance, but it just the composition of the team, the national selector, what is he looking for? Is he looking for people who are going to work, and that's something you have to consider. What style of rider is he? Is he going to be prepared to work for another rider in the end of the race, or is he a bit of a loner? He wants to do his own thing, and it's understandable because, of course, of the World Championships, we're in the national team, and it's a totally different situation from what they ride in all year, where they're in trade teams here, and it's been a problem for donkey's years getting riders to pull together again to work for each other, and you definitely need a number of domestiques, and that could be the situation as well as it is in the Italian team. There's a number of very good riders who are capable maybe of winning the race, but you can't have all chiefs and no Indians, so that is probably part of the situation maybe as well. I don't know really the what is the reason, but we're hearing it every day. There's riders hoping to get selected, and riders when the selection comes out disappointing.
Yeah, it's always the way, isn't it? Pedraza and Rosendo with 68.7 kilometres still to go, and the gap down to 3 minutes and 37 seconds. It looks like it's going to end up as a big sprint today into Zamora after 186.3 kilometres. People no longer in this Vuelta a España. Yesterday, Alessandro Ballan did not start. Artur Gajic thrown out yesterday again for following too close behind the car. That was the problem with one of the other riders in this year's Vuelta a España as well, following for too long a time. It was Lopez Gil, wasn't it, who got chucked out for doing that, and Artur Gajic from Milram getting exactly the same treatment.
And to get chucked out, from my experience, it's a difficult one.
You have to be there a long time.
You have to be behind the car for a long time. Of course, if you if you catch the car and hang on to the car, well, then you get thrown out immediately. But behind the car, normally the commissars, they will come along and they will say, careful, you cannot do that again. Or if you're behind the car, they will say, just get away, get out of that. And if you do it, if you obey the orders on the road, you don't get thrown out that easy. But if you some guys, they just get behind the car, and when the commissar come, they just tell the commissar to go for himself, and that's looking for trouble. And that's the time you can get thrown out. And just talking about out, of course, Cunego also did not start this morning, so the Italians for the World Championships, it's the moment when they start resting up and start calculating, and another one out today, as you said, Ballan yesterday. So it's been the case in the past number of years in the Vuelta, where they just start in the last week thinking about the Worlds, and some riders need that extra number of days to recover. Bettini, of course, he seems to go on longer every year than a lot of the other big favourites, and that is an individual thing. Some riders do not need as much time to recover, and they just prefer to continue on the race, because if they stop, they feel they do not get the best of themselves in the World Championships.
The Vuelta's always suffered from something akin to that, hasn't it, really? I mean, this the way it's placed in the calendar now, we get big star riders coming along and then withdrawing because they're preparing for the World Championships. It used to be the case before that when it's been at other times of the year, people would come along and prepare for the Giro d'Italia and then go off and do the Giro. Or in some cases, very early on in its history, it was colliding with the Tour de France, so the other people would come along and do a little bit of the Vuelta and then go off and do the Tour de France. It is something that's severely affected the Vuelta throughout its history.
Yes, well, it certainly has an effect, and these last years since the change of date to the end of season, certainly for the World Championships, the riders, the big names that do come along, a lot of them just leave and go to get ready for the World Championships in this final week, as we're seeing with a lot of the big names. And then a lot of the bigger riders, maybe who are not going for the World Championships, they've finished the season already, so they do not take part in it. So certainly the Vuelta is one which I think of the big three big tours is the one who suffer most because of its time on the calendar.
It does seem to, doesn't it? Which is it's a great shame for the organisers. They've done sterlingly to keep it going. The 63rd running of the Vuelta a España. Interesting that the Tour of Poland, which is also being broadcast here live on Eurosport with David Duffield and Carl Kirby doing the honours in the commentary box, 65 editions that has had, so even older than the Vuelta itself. Amy writing in on Eurosport cycling at hotmail.fr saying a man dressed up as one of the riders joined at the head of an escape group and rode along in the Tour of California this year, putting everybody on the rivet. She thinks it was either stage 3 or 4 in the Tour of California. I didn't know that. Did you know that?
No, it's the first I've heard of it.
That's the first I've heard of it as well. She says, as an aside, thanks to Sean, who mentioned the weather. It's now been raining all the time in Ireland since he mentioned it, so that's good. I didn't know that. Man infiltrating the breakaway and causing some problems for those people in it. You'd have thought they'd have recognised who it might have been, but I suppose with a lot of foreign riders coming over the Tour of California and domestic races, they probably wouldn't know who they were. It's not unusual, actually, for that to happen. And in the early days of the Vuelta a España, in fact, I think it was 1946 or 47, something like that, it was so hot in the Vuelta that they rolled along at such a pace, such a slow pace, because remember, we're talking about before the Giro d'Italia here, so we're talking about early May. It was 45 degrees in early May, and they were rolling along on these big heavy bicycles through Granada and down that sort of way to Zaragoza and places like that. That local club members and local cyclists just came out and joined them for miles and miles and miles on end. So it's not unusual. I don't know if that's ever happened in the Tour de France, but I wouldn't like to put money against it, or the Giro. People actually coming and joining in and riding along the back. It certainly happened in the Vuelta more than once, and that's the most famous occasion on that particular drought-ridden May back in the mid-1940s. Talking of the Vuelta and historically, one person so far has got the answer to the question I asked at the end of the Vuelta. Two Galicians feature in the top 5 as being part of the biggest gaps between first and second rider. Both of the Galicians won, by the way, and I wanted to know who they were, what year it was, and if you knew the time gaps. Only one person has got it right so far. It's extraordinary that some people can actually get into a major bike race and just pretend. Now, mind you, we've seen it on football pitches and so on. People who dash on and pose with the teams for photos. It's not much different, really. It's the same sort of thing. On a slightly less light note, and back to the news, what have the French press been saying today, as most of the coverage is for the World Championships and all sorts of bits and pieces going on in L'Equipe today?
Well, of course, talking about the World Championships, Moncotti, he was going to get a place, as we see him here on our screen at the moment, in the mountains classement jersey. He was on the French team while being selected, and he said, no, I'm not really interested in the Worlds. I've had a very difficult and long season this year. I'm not physically, mentally not ready for it, and he said he would rather to leave the place to another rider who was really up for it and wanted to go for the race and really do a performance. So it's we've also seen that in the past years where riders are going pretty well and their nation selects them, but they do not want to go because they're getting to the end of season. And I think it's a fair one, because if you go to the World, you have to be really motivated to do a performance, especially on a circuit race. It's always difficult, and 260 kilometers, of course. So to give up your place to another one if you're not really feeling like you're going to go for the race and try and give your best performance.
Well, at least Moncoutier's come out and said it openly. It's good for him. He's had a great Vuelta a España, and the best end to a season that I've seen for a long time for Moncoutier. We're looking down on the peloton, just strung out at the moment. Stana at the front. One man from Case d'Espagne right at the front. Roger Slade writing in on Eurosport Cycling at hotmail.fr. He says, I've got every transmission of the Tour on tape for many, many years now. Crikey, you must have a big video storage cabinet. I can't recall the year, but on one of the Pyrenean stages in the 1980s, there was a view down from a helicopter. A spectator standing on the side of the road jumped up and into the road to run next to a rider, and a commissaire's car hit him. He went straight over the top of the bonnet, hit the windscreen, rolled down the side of the road, picked himself up, went staggering off up the road, and still urged his rider on, running up the hill. There's some easy bits and pieces going on. Of course, it's always crazy watching those fans that stand out to take photographs. Giuseppe Guerini, probably the most spectacular one. How you could possibly miss a rider coming straight at you, I can't imagine. Welcome back live here on the Vuelta a España. It's Milram at the front. Mate Jurko is the man second back. I can't tell who's the man in front at the moment, and they're just rolling along with the peloton homing in second by second onto the guys in there ahead. We've got Walter Pedraza and Jose Rezendo up the road. They've got about 7 minutes, then Bettini up the pace a weeny bit, and they're starting to pull it back together again now. I think the man at the front was Christian Cooks, which is why I didn't recognise him immediately. And once again, Yurko sitting near the front, doing a lot of work. He's a real tough old character. Two people have now got answers to the questions. Some, one has got half the answer right, and the other one's got it. They really are just rolling along today. Plenty of time for questions and comments on eurosportcycling@hotmail.fr. Linley in Thailand. So you must be listening on Eurosport World, and welcome to everybody on Eurosport World. And Linley, I don't know if you do an awful lot of cycling. Got a couple of questions. On a day like today, Sean, it's pretty hot. They're getting their water bottles handed up. They have to take a lot of liquid on board. What sort of temperature are they getting those water bottles at? Because I mean, we both know if you get it too hot, it's pretty unpalatable. Too cold can be a bit difficult.
Yes, well, of course, too cold it would not be good. The body is so warm, of course, out there because of the warm conditions. Also, you're working there at it. Although today the rate they're going, they're not going to be overheating because of the if they're putting in. But still, you cannot have real ice cold drinks. You do not, have them. But you'd have not a problem with that because we must remember in the team car they have these fridge boxes, and they fill up. They put a bit of ice in the morning time, and the water is quite cold going in. So it would be, just the temperature would be cool, but certainly not ice water, because it's certainly, not a thing that the bike riders like to have, and it's not a done thing.
Well, very pleased to say, to enlighten and enliven the day as they roll along doing absolutely knack all, is Scott Sunderland in the car for CSC. Scott, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine, no problem.
Excellent. Tell us about yesterday. Well, tell us about Jurgen van Geulen for a start. He almost got away to perhaps go for a stage victory on Isidro, but it didn't quite work out for him. Disappointed?
Yeah, I think he was very much disappointed. I mean, he worked very hard for it. He'd been there for Carlos for the days before, and we said, look, you have today's the day to really take the opportunity to go for it for yourself. He closed the gap on his own there at a crucial moment, and then he was out there. But unfortunately, Custer Spun had different ideas about the day and brought them back. Barring that they rode so hard, I'm sure that he would have went home for the victory, as you've seen on TV.
We noticed yesterday he was under a bit of pressure. We didn't see your boys at the front. I guess you left it up to Cofidis to do the work. But Van Geulen slipping behind Garcia and Garate yesterday.
Yeah, Jurgen paid pretty much for it yesterday. He lost a bit of time. He came on a steep climb there, and he just wasn't up for it, and out of position at the bottom. And then on the climb itself, he lost a few places and had a split in front of him, and he was caught behind.
And Matty had a pretty good day there, Matty Bretschel. He says he's in good shape for the Worlds. Was it a pre-planned move, get him into the break, or was he just looking for an opportunity at some point to get in the break?
Yeah, no, it was definitely a pre-planned move. We talked about it in the morning that if we could get someone away that would like to get Kolovnev or Matty Bretschel in the front, mainly because those two guys are able to get over the club at the finish, and it worked out really well. Unfortunately, Matty was, just missed it by that little bit at the top. So 2 days in a row we've missed it by, bugger all.
Just moving on to the man for the podium, Carlos. How is Carlos feeling? He looks as though the last couple of times we've seen him, he's been under real pressure. And when Mosquera went the other day, we were surprised to see Valverde go bang. But and also, Carlos just really did go bang the other day, didn't he?
Yeah, Carlos is getting pretty tired now. I mean, he's really been under pressure since before the tour. Coming to the tour, there's always a lot of big preparation. You're putting stress on yourself to be ready on time. Then with the tour, as it was, we were dominating the race in a lot of different ways. And of course, Carlos was also up there the whole time. And then the last week with the stress of everything. And then, a very stressful week before he left to go to the Olympics. And then the Olympics and winning there with the Spanish team with Sanchez. Then home again, and then just everything coming into the Volta as one of the favourites. I mean, when is the last time we've seen a Tour de France winner on the podium or looked like getting on the podium and then tried to race for the victory here in Tour of Spain? It's a pretty big call, you know. And yeah, he's starting to pay for him now. You can't go on forever as long as you might think you would try. It's not always up to the mind. The body's got to be able to follow.
Well, he's coming under pressure by Mosquera from behind. Where do you see the real danger stages now for Carlos? Where's he going to hang on to that gap he's got over Mosquera?
I think he'd be okay now. He just needs a few days rest now. I talked to him last night. We're just trying to protect him a little bit. Stop doing interviews, and that's hard for Carlos because as soon as he gets out of the bus, everybody wants to be there, and photographs and signatures, and then everybody from the press wants him, and he just can't say no. That's his biggest problem. And I sort of say to him, Carlos, you just need to turn your phone off and do this. He says, yeah, I will, but he never does. And so he's probably his own worst enemy on that part. And I just hope that now if he can get 2 or 3 days where he gives himself some peace and quiet, I'm quite sure he'll be fine for Friday and Saturday. And I think he can hang on to the podium. I hope so anyway. I hope so for him.
Just moving away from your own team for a second, well, not necessarily from your own team, but just to today's stage. I mean, they're rolling along pretty nice and easy today. Going to come back together for a bunch sprint. Who do you see as being up there and contending today?
Definitely Bornham's up for it today. I spoke to him last night. They were staying at the same hotel, and he said that he's going to see how he goes the next couple of days, and maybe he might leave the Tour of Spain before the end so he can prepare properly 100% for the World Championships. And so I'm pretty sure he wants to try and kick a goal while he's still here, and I think he'd be definitely the fastest man for that job at this moment. And we're hoping that, hopefully Matty Breschel might have some dramatic recovery from yesterday that he can be up there, but there's a few other guys as well. We'll have to see how it goes.
Well, we look forward to hearing from you hopefully a little bit later in the Vuelta. We haven't been able to speak to you for the last week or so, been mountains and all that sort of stuff, but good luck for today. We'll chat to you perhaps later in the week, well, certainly before the end of this Vuelta of Spain. Thanks for joining us, Scott.
No worries, Dave. Say good day to Sean for us, eh?
I will do. Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
Scott Sunderland, Director Sportive of CSC. Of course, the weight of Carlos Sastra's podium place on his shoulders. He is coming under pressure, Sastra, from Mosquera. There are a couple of stages where he could still find himself under a bit of pressure. Maybe into Segovia, although it is a downhill run. There are 2 big mountains going into Segovia. What do you think? Do you think he's safe?
I think the time trial is the one where you could get caught out, but Mosquera, not a magnificent time trialist either, and Sastra, he's experienced in that, and when he has to put up a good time trial, he's able to do it. We've seen the Tour this year, he just came out there and put up the performance, although a different situation, as Scott said, he's starting to get tired now because of all he's been through in the last 6 weeks since the Tour de France, Olympics, and the appearance race as well, which he made a number of them, and receptions. But I think the time trial is the one where he could come under problems. But I'd have major confidence. 54 seconds over Mosquera. I think we will see him hanging on to a podium, and it's nice to see a Tour of France winner getting onto the podium, because as Scott Sunderland said, it's not you have to really think deep, and I would certainly think for a while a winner of the Tour of France battling it should be on the podium of the Tour of Spain at the end of the year. I cannot remember one immediately off the top of my head.
Just trying to think. Can't think of one immediately. And well, Carlos just has a few days left to hang on to that 3rd spot. Above him, Levi Leipheimer and Alberto Contador. It seems a bit of a done deal, doesn't it, for Astana at the moment. That doesn't mean anything, though. Bike racing is a fickle mistress, and things could still happen. Rosendo is the man in your shot. Jose Rosendo, the first wearer, or he was early wearer of the Mountains classification jersey. He's got Walter Pedraza with him from Tinkoff. There he is, the former Colombian national champion. And they've been out for a long time. They did get up for about 7 minutes, and then Paolo Bettini chopped down that advantage. And as Scott Sunderland was telling us, Tom Bowden wanted to go for another victory today. before perhaps he leaves the Vuelta a España to prepare for the World Championships. And I think they've got the Vuelta organisers got fairly good value out of Bettini and Bonin. They've been around for a fair while, even if there's not been nothing much going on for Bonin for a few days. At least he stayed here to get into shape. We shall see what sort of good shape he's in, perhaps today. And some riders, Sean, respond better to going longer distances, as you've said. Some guys just like to ride themselves into fitness day after day after day.
Yes, well, that is the situation. You know, they all differ, and the other situation is what you have been doing through the season. And Bourne, of course, a little bit different this year because he hasn't the Tour of France under his belt, and that, you know, that helps from to go on longer in this race and maybe go on to the end. Who knows? But you know, certainly riding a Tour of France and then coming to do the Tour of Spain here, it's very, very tiring, and that's the reason we're seeing a lot of the riders who've had, you know, a busy program of races with the Tour of France included, going out and starting to rest that bit earlier, needing that number of days extra to prepare for the World Championships.
Yeah. It's the two big centres of his training attention really come at the beginning of the season for the European Classics, the Northern Classics, Tour of Flanders, Paris-Roubaix, so on and so forth, and the World Championships. How difficult is it, John, to sort of get yourself to two separate peaks? I mean, is it easier if you're avoiding things like the green jersey in the Tour de France, to bring yourself to two separate peaks of fitness for two separate types of occasions? Is it difficult to plan your year?
Well, it's not much too difficult. 2 peaks in the year, it should be definitely possible. And as you just said, the classics. If you're a classic rider and you're a sprinter, of course, which, you know, normally that is the situation. You prepare at the beginning of season, do all the classic campaign, and try and be in top shape for that, and then have a rest period and build up again for the Tour of France and stages and the green jersey. But if you're riding for a green jersey in the Tour of France, you know, every day you have to be up there and try and pick off points. And you know, we've seen the past number of years the way the green jersey is so closely contested between them top 4 or 5 guys. They have to go for the intermediate sprints during the day, and then when you arrive there's a breakaway of 4 or 5 riders. You still have to make that sprint every day just to pick up the points as you know, as they're available every day on the road. So it is demanding, and you know, it can take a lot out of you. And then if you're playing for the World Championships as well, so you're really talking, you know, about 3 peaks in the season, and it is, you know, not easy for some riders to do that. And 2 peaks, I think, is very, very possible a target to get to, but the 3rd peak, sometimes riders have difficulty as they get towards the end of the season. They start to, you know, fatigue sets in, and mentally as well. They, you know, some riders have difficulty, you know, keeping that concentration for the World Championships.
To be fair, Bonin's had a very long season, if you think about it. Started way back in January, the Tour of Qatar, which he won overall, as well as 3 separate stages. Won a stage in California, Paris-Roubaix won this year, and then Tour of the Benelux we saw in August, winning 2 stages there. Tour of Wallonie, a stage there just a month before. So, you know, although he wasn't at the Tour, he went all the way through the year, taking victories all the way through. Sprinting the last one into Cordoba, as we know here in the Vuelta a España. That's a pretty long season, starting by winning off in the Tour of Qatar and having to keep up that sort of momentum right the way through the year, probably aided by the fact he didn't have to go for the green jersey. Not of his own making, I have to say. Not allowed to go, or withdrawn by his team for having tested positive out of competition for cocaine as a recreational drug. But even so, continued winning through that period as well, with Tour of Austria and Tour of Wallonie, 2 stages there, one into Vienna and one into Saunier at Tour of Wallonie. So Tom Bonin up for another win today, if he possibly can. Well, the gap gradually coming down, but they're not reeling it in particularly hard. That man yesterday, Alberto Contador, had a bit of a tumble. Didn't hurt himself too badly. A few cuts and bruises on his left leg. Instantly looked at by the doctor. Paolo Bettini got stung by a wasp today. It was fantastic looking at the official explanation for that. Paolo Bettini goes to doctor, stung by wasp. Stop. The world champion soldiers on. Stop. So that was quite good. But it can be a bit difficult. Some people react to them really badly, especially under riding conditions. Greg van Avermaet has had a puncture in the last 5 or 6 kilometres. No problems whatsoever. New rear wheel, wallop, in it goes, and straight back to the peloton. If ever you wanted to have or ever you had a mechanical problem, this is the time to have it rather than anywhere else. He looks ever so relaxed, considering really another blown opportunity at a Grand Tour, Sean. He does have this ability, like all top riders, like yourself, for example. You've said many times to me that, you know, if something goes wrong, it's gone wrong. There's nothing you can do about it. No point brooding about it. Pick yourself up, get on with it, and get on with the next one.
Yes, and it might be a big help to Valverde that it did happen to him with a week to go in this race, that you know, the podium was really out of his reach. And for the World Championships, you know, the day that it happened and the following day there was a lot of talk, but then the press leave you alone and you're kind of forgotten about a bit more. Where we heard with Scott Sunderland and Sastre, like a lot of the press want to talk, and because he's the Tour winner, of course, but also because he's in line for the podium here, and that might, you know, be a big advantage to Valverde for the World Championships. We could see him, you know, doing a better performance than he would if he was fighting here every day to stay up in the general classement on a podium place in this Vuelta.
Live on stage 16 here in the Vuelta a España at Santovenia, with some 45 kilometres still to go. Our two men out ahead are Jose Rosendo and Walter Pedraza. Rosendo of the Andalucia Carasur squad, and there is Pedraza of Tinkoff Credit Systems. They've been out for a long time and just churning away. The peloton has them in sight. They've got about 7.5 minutes, nearly 8 minutes actually, of a lead. First of all, on the descent of the one climb of the day, the Alto de Acebo. They came after 16 kilometres, the summit, and they escaped on the lower slopes. In fact, Rosendo had started to go on the way up. Moncoutier was the next man over, and Pedraza joined Rosendo on the descent of the Acebo, and they have continued out ahead ever since. Talking of Moncoutier, we're just looking at the stats, or Sean was just looking up the stats for Moncoutier for this year. He's definitely going to hang on to, I reckon he's definitely going to hang on to that jersey. Still some big mountains to come, but he's got a good lead at the moment, but making sure he added points by getting over the top just behind Rosendo. Most of these riders here have done what, 67, 68, 80 days a year, 80 days this year of racing. David Moncoutier did 6 last year because of his injury. How many has he done this year, Sean?
94.
94 days racing. Wow, he must have done more than nearly anybody in this Vuelta a España.
Of course, he's coming from the year, as you said, you know, as 6 last year, and I think the past 2 years, the year previous to that, he was also injured. So I would say the number of racing days he had was quite low over the past 2 years. So this year he's done a big one, and sometimes it's like that because you recharge the batteries quite a lot, and you need a lot of race maybe to get into top shape again, and at that time of your career as Moncoutier, it's, you know, he's pushing on. It takes a longer time to get back in there, and certainly it's not affecting him here, because you see the way he's riding. He's very aggressive, and we've talked about a number of times getting into breaks. Once again today, the past number of days, picking up points, and I think he could be up here with the two leaders, but he just picked up the points on that climb and then waited. So he's calculating, not giving his, you know, certainly going out in a crazy 3-man breakaway all day, because he'd pay the price for that later. He's certainly thinking about taking the mountain jersey all the way to Madrid.
Yeah, he certainly is, and there are still some big mountains to come. There's a third category climb on stage 18 at the Alto de los Leones, which has featured just about on nearly every Vuelta a España, and then 2 first category climbs on the way to Segovia on stage 19, the Navacerrada and the Navalfria, which are both going to feature highly on his hit list, one would imagine. 155 is the gap for these two over the peloton. Now the rumour mill keeps churning on. As we've said, we were reporting the other day that the rumours were now linking Samuel Sanchez with moving away from Euskaltel to either Katusha, or the rumours were circulating yesterday in the press in Spain and in France that he was now talking to Cervelo, and although some of our friends and viewers who follow Spanish cycling very carefully were writing in saying, no, he's signed with Euskaltel for the next couple of years, and he did that some time ago. As Sean was saying, a contract can have a buyout clause, and there's no reason why they have to hold people down anymore to go if they want to go elsewhere, if the money is good enough and they can buy out of that clause. Well, having a bit of a dig around to those really reliable sources, it appears Sanchez is a definite no-no for Cervelo, but we do understand that Simon Gerrans is now being linked with Cervelo, and even more interestingly, and just as excitingly, two lead-out men for Tor Uzov, who we know has gone to Cervelo. He confirmed it himself last week, although we brought you the rumour a week or so before. Brett Lancaster and Hayden Ralston now being linked with Cervelo as part of that lean-out train for Tor Uzov. So you heard it here first on Eurosport. Hayden Ralston and Brett Lancaster possibly going to Cervelo as part of the lead-out train for Tor Uzov. Gerrans also thinking and being linked with Cervelo, this new test team being fronted up by, of course, Carlos Sastre, riding Cervelo bikes, and I'm sure the name will change at some point as they bring in another big sponsor, in the same way as the Slipstream team has changed to Garmin Chipotle. But Sami Sanchez, big no-no. No, not with Cervelo. So the Katusha rumour may still have something in it, but he's riding at the moment through the Poland for Euskaltel. So on it goes. Stewart writing in, and we were saying this, although it was fairly humorous when Pedro Jarillo stole the stars and bars from the chap with the big antlers on. Stu said, I hope you read this out. You know, I've been following cycling for 50 years, and I've seen my share of crazies, but just imagine what would have happened if the riders were really racing and that guy with the flag and the horn helmet had tripped over and fallen into them. I think we mentioned something a little similar at the time, but you're absolutely right. Being on a serious note, that would cause absolute carnage. Keep the stories of crazy things coming in if you want to. Eurosport Cycling and hotmail.fr. Roland in Red Ruth in Cornwall. This is very pertinent, actually, to the rumours and so on. I'm just wondering if you could explain to me how a contract is made up. Well, for a rider and a team, actually there are two different types of contracts. Essentially, there's a standard UCI contract, which you can actually find the guidelines for a standard UCI contract if you go to the UCI website. But they make sure that there's a proper relationship between the rider and the team, and that certain obligations are fulfilled on both sides, and that is usually the first point of call for a team who wants to sign a rider. The standard UCI contract for riders riding at any particular level, whether it be Pro Tour or Pro Continental, they're all the same. And then there can be, and sometimes often is, a separate contract which is entirely separate from the UCI contract between the team itself and the rider, for other things like bonuses and travel expenses and length of contract, prize monies, and so on and so forth. It falls outside of the UCI contract situation, because the UCI are just dealing with the mechanics of getting it legally correct. Anything else that the team decides with a rider is up to them, and they often have a separate contract. Sometimes they have an amalgam of two, Sean, don't they?
Yes, well, it's, depending on the rider, of course, and you know, the bigger riders, they would have more clauses in their contract, and the employer, which would be a sporting group who manages the team and who gets the sponsor, they might have a clause in if a rider gets injured, for example, which is the one that I experienced in my time. They would pay you for so many weeks while you're injured, but then you have got an insurance of your own which takes on because if you're out for 5 or 6 months, they certainly will not pay you for that time. So you're paid maybe the first 6 weeks in injury time, and after that you've got to have your own insurance, and that is understandable, because if you're not able to perform for the team, if you get a very bad injury and you're out for a year, of course, well then the team is certainly not going to pay you all that time if you're not performing and not racing for the team.
Yeah, so there is, as I say, there's a standard UCI contract, and the teams themselves have their own particular deals to do with riders. And as Sean was saying, that largely goes around, how long you get paid if you have a problem, or prize monies, or so on and so forth. Somebody was asking things about bikes the other day. In fact, we were discussing this. David Duffield and Carlton Kirby were discussing this live on the Tour of Poland, which was showing on Eurosport 2, by the way, every afternoon, about riders who do or don't get their bikes at the end of the season. I mean, some riders do, Sean, don't they? Actually have it written into their contracts.
Yes, again, the standard thing would be that they give you a bike back, but again, riders put it into their contract that they keep a bike at the end of the season, and that would be more so, for the domestiques in the team. But the leaders of a team, for example, would always, manage to get a bike or two from the team at the end of the year. That would not be a problem, but the general understanding across the board with the teams is that all the bikes go back, and the team sells them on, or maybe they go back to the bike manufacturer. That is also in cases where they take back the bikes, and they sell them on some way. I'm not exactly sure who they sell them to, but I suppose some of the distributors may be that they would have a market for second-hand bikes, and also the bike suppliers, there would be a big demand for the riders' bikes as well as for bike shops, and that they would be very interested in having them on display, and in bike shows, of course, which we see a lot of it.
Yeah, seeing a lot of that. 134 is the gap between the two lead riders, Resendo and Pedraza, back to the peloton. I know there are some guys, certainly in the United States, I know of one guy who's a big Colnago fan, who would go to Rabobank or go to Milram at the beginning of the season and negotiate that he could buy a number of the bikes at the end of the season. That's exactly what he would do. Maybe take 6 or 7 of them off their hands, keep one for his own personal collection, and the rest they get auctioned on things like eBay or bike shows or whatever. There used to be a guy in the, I can't remember, he was in the Melton Olympic, I think he was in the Melton Olympic, who had one of Ralph Aldag's old bikes, which he'd paid considerably over the odds for, I have to say. It was the right size, but just because it was an ex-team bike. And they are slightly different. I mean, they are not necessarily, in that particular era, they're probably still built to size and specification. A lot of them are off the peg, but they do have slight different things in them. A lot of them have little mounting points for the race number plates, you see, and stuff like that, but which you wouldn't normally get on an off-the-peg frame. But just to own somebody's bike with the name on the top tube sometimes is worth 500, 600, 1,000, maybe 2,000 more, depending on who it is. So a lot of them get sold on to collectors and people who are big fans. Rosendo just shaking those thighs a little bit, trying to get a little bit of life back in the legs. Cramping could be a real big problem in heat like this, and a lot of electrolyte fluids being shoved down the gullet today. Incidentally, they are riding Orbeas, as you can see, Orbea Orcas, Andalucia Carrosser. Orbea, a Basque bicycle manufacturing company, hence they will be staying with Euskaltel. These guys here, Tinkoff, when they metamorphose into Katusha next year, will no longer be riding Colnagos, they'll be riding Ridleys. Good move for Ridley, very smart move. They've a company that's very interesting. They started off in Belgium with a chap who just specialised in doing paint jobs on frames, and the quality of his paintwork was renowned. He used to do it in his garage at home, and then it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And thanks to a couple of guys, especially one British guy, Ken Jones, the models themselves, or the brand itself, really expanded across Europe. They saw these paint jobs, and he started to produce bikes, or buy-in frames first of all, and then buy-in frames from the Far East, and then start producing his own bikes. And they got really well known. Great when they linked up with a Belgian team, of course, Ridley, named Ridley after Ridley Scott, who was the chap's favourite film director. That's why they're called Ridleys. A good move for them, though, going to a massive team like Katusha. Ceylon Slaughter already big, but you have to be pretty big, Sean, to deal with a team like Katusha, which got a budget of 15 million euros a year for 2 years. You've got to be a big concern. You shouldn't, if you're out there thinking that these guys get paid to supply bikes. It's the other way around. The bike companies are paying to have their bikes used by a big team, even if it is as big budget as Katusha's. You've got to be pretty big concern.
Yes, well, certainly, you know, it's there's a fee involved. You have to give the bikes to the team, of course, but then that agreement, do you give the bikes back, or do the team hold on to them? That's something, you know, differs between teams. But you know, we've seen the past number of years it's got very expensive to supply. To be a supplier to some of the big teams is quite a big budget. They are also included in that, and the bikes, I think 130, 160 bikes maybe to a big team. So it's certainly, you know, a big cost for the bicycle manufacturers. It's not only just giving bikes.
Yeah, true. Big cost to the manufacturers. Well, good on Ridley for doing that. And it is a big thing to have a team to develop with if you're a bicycle manufacturer, and anybody who wants to be anybody within the bicycle industry, if they really want to show that their product is of the very highest quality and the very best, they end up with a professional team, and the bigger the professional team, the more exposure they get. It seems a shame to me that we won't see Colnago in the peloton next year. As far as we know, Milram are not riding Colnagos next year, neither are Rabobank, neither are Tinkoff. So I think Lambau Credit seem to be the only team still riding Colnagos, and they are a pro-continental team. Steve Cummings started with Lambau Credit. Paul Manning rides for them, and Ian Stannard as well. So Cummings, of course, has gone to Barlow World and named in the 6-man lineup for the World Championships, along with David Miller, Ian Stannard, Steve Cummings. Mark Cavendish is in there as well. And Cavendish going to the World Championships, that's, I don't know, is that a big ask? We've talked about it a lot, Sean. He must feel fairly confident, or they must feel that he needs the experience, or maybe they feel he can do something, but rather a surprise, I thought.
Yes, it is a surprise. I think the World Championship circuit certainly not the perfect one for Cav, but you know, yeah, he's had a magnificent season, and maybe it's for experience as well. Although he's still riding very well, we see, you know, the past number of weeks just, you know, picking off wins every day, and I think in, what was it, Missouri, he was up there and won quite a few stages, and Tour of Ireland, of course, he won a number of them. So the form is very good, but the big question, you know, for that sort of circuit, is it good enough? Because it's a long race, 260 Ks. But again, like the experience we've talked about in the Tour of France, I think you know, he has a huge career ahead of him, and the classics and all of that. So maybe he wants to go and just do the distance and gain experience also, and that's certainly the place where you will get you know, huge experience riding in that race. I would see it difficult for him to be, you know, really up there in the final of this sort of circuit for this year, certainly.
Well, we'll just have to see how it all pans out in the World Championships, which begin next Tuesday, and we are going right the way through the week live on Eurosport with the under-23 men's time trial, the women's time trial, the under-23 men's road race, women's road race, men's elite time trial, and men's elite road racing as well. Finishing up on the Sunday. Sean and I will be live in the commentary box. Emma Davies will be joining us at times, and we'll see who else we can drag in as well, which will be good. No place for Rob Hales in the World Championship squad. That's always a difficult one, Sean, isn't it? When you are the national champion, to be left out of a team going to the World Championships. You may well not perhaps suit that particular course, but it always looks, to the average viewer, it always looks a bit unusual that the national champion, supposedly the best man in a one-day race in the UK, is not picked for a World Championship.
Yes, for the viewers, certainly, you know, it looks it doesn't look right, but you must remember the the national champion, what sort of circuit it was on, and you know, the style of rider as well. And sometimes I think you know, a national champion, he might not be too interested in going to the World Championship if it's not his circuit, and if it does not suit him really at all. So you know, we see so many different stories with the World Championships. Riders are very disappointed not getting selected. Other ones, as we talked about, Monk with D, you know, who is going well, and that sort of circuit would suit him because it's more so for a climber. A better climber would get around a bit more, but if you're not really mentally ready, ready for it, you can really get focused and go in there with a very positive attitude for the race. Well, there's no point in it there. So you know, certainly some national champions would be disappointed. Other ones, you know, they would not really want to go there, because if they can't do a performance, well, then it's probably not good for, you know, your followers and your supporters to see you not being able to do some sort of performance at a World Championships if you're the national champion of the year.
Well, the guy on the motocross bike seems to be having fun following the side of the road there. I'd be interested to know if anybody else remembers that day when the chap jumped over the top of the peloton riding along from one side of the road to the other, from one field to another over the top of the road. I can't remember when it was, but certainly somebody did do it. These are our two breakaway riders, Jose Rosendo of Andalusia Carasur and Walter Pedraza of Tinkoff. They've been at it for a while now. 2 minutes and 8 seconds. It's sort of yo-yoing about between 2.5 minutes and 2 minutes now, or just under. And they're running into Zamora today. 186.3 kilometres in total. Keep the questions and comments coming if you want to. Eurosportcycling@hotmail.fr. And remember, there still is a question to answer. The largest time gaps at the finish in Madrid in the Vuelta a España. The top 5 biggest time gaps. There are 2 Galicians in there. Can you tell me who they are, what year they are, and what the gaps were? We mentioned that, of course, after David Garcia's win for Jacobo Galicia yesterday, and there's a huge amount in the Spanish press about Galician cycling being saved by David Garcia. We're going to take a commercial break. No, we're not going to take a commercial break. We had this in the Tour of Poland yesterday. They now inform us we're not going to take a commercial break. Or are we? I can see Stefan Schumacher up towards the front today. He's been very, very quiet through this Tour of Spain. He's one rider who's definitely riding himself into form for the World Championships and nothing else, I feel. Okay, we are going to go to a break. We'll be back shortly. Back live on the Tour of Spain. It's stage 16 from Ponferrada to Zamora. Now we've got horses and the motorcycles at the side of the road today. It's interesting, we don't see the Osborne Bulls anymore across the plains of Spain. I think they got taken down by a European directive, didn't they? Which is a bit of a shame, because it sort of seemed to characterise the Vuelta a España for many, many, many years. But never mind. Another bit of Brussels bureaucracy that's doing this of something on the side of the road. Never mind.
Well, there's still some hanging out there. We've seen the.
Yeah, there's still them. I've not seen any at all this year.
Yes, I think we've seen one today already. And
have you?
Yes.
Gosh.
They're still hanging up there on the top of these little hills.
It's a fine day for bike riding today, and the peloton have been rolling on at next to nothing today. Our French colleague Patrick Chassé said when he looked at the average speed for the first 2 hours, which was just under 28 kilometres an hour, that, you know what, I think I could ride in the break today. And he probably could. Commentating with Jean-François Bernard, whereas Tour of Poland is being done by Jackie Dion. For French, for the UK, for British, and for English International, it's Carlton Kirby and David Duffield. 2 minutes and 17 seconds. The gap's going out a bit, and thankfully, riding to the rescue in the Silon Slotto car, as we see Silon Slotto in front of us, is Hendrik Redant. Hendrik, it's lovely to talk to you, because there's nothing going on much here at the moment, is there?
Nothing much indeed. We have about 33 average, so it's really a long day in a way.
Do you think that Sean and yourself and I could ride in the peloton today at this sort of speed?
I think you could be, yeah, it should be possible, I suppose.
Now, tell us, Greg Van Avermaet, he's still up there with a chance of that points jersey, very much so, but it's getting tight at the top of that competition. What's the game plan?
No, anyway, for sure it's getting tight because you can be pretty sure that Contador still has some points to take also in the time trial as well as in the stage the day before. So, but we will take the advantage of these 2-3 stages coming up and maybe also the one in Madrid. And I think that's also why we try to control the race together with Quickstep and Milram to give them the opportunity to make a good sprint, first for stage victory, but for sure also in view and objectively for that blue jersey.
Yeah, it must be your objective really, that and stage wins if you can get them, of course. But your best placed man on general classification is Dominic Cornu. I mean, former under-23 world time trial champion. He's having a terrific Vuelta España.
Well, he had a very good start. Unfortunately, he got a bit sick about 3-4 days ago, just the day before the climb up to Angliru. Even on that day, he managed well to still have. He still had the forces just to keep in the group and keep his forces for getting his position. But the next 2 days were a disaster for him, and he paid all those efforts, you know, and in a way now he's lost in classification. So our main objective now is to help Greg up towards that eventually first place in the point classification.
How is he feeling, Greg?
He's feeling great. He's also very confident. I had a really good talk with him last night and making him aware that it would be a really beautiful thing to go for that jersey and also maybe aiming another stage win in his first Tour of Spain, his first big tour.
Now, today is eventually going to come down to a big sprint. Does he feel as he has the legs today? I see that Bettini went chasing off after these two guys, cutting the gap down. So Bonen's definitely up for it. How does Greg feel today?
No, he's fine, but for sure, of course, the big favorite today will be Bonen. We know that also, but as long as you don't close the gap, you don't have any chances at all of trying to go for the win. I saw that Greg could beat Bonen already. Also last week when Sébastien Hinault won in front of Mondori, also Bonen was behind of Greg. So there's always a possibility, but first you have to close and work and close the gap to have that opportunity. So that's why we also go for it. And even though Bonen is great favorite today, we're going to go for trying to have the stage win.
Have you managed to talk to any of your colleagues in Poland? Your guys having a bit of a nasty crash on that opening, almost crit-like team time trial.
Yeah, it was a bit dramatic for our team. We had a good time, I heard, but Dario Cioni crashed as leading out the team, and so a few guys went over, and unfortunately Jürgen van der Broek broke his collarbone, and Cioni himself got full with bruises, also Jürgen Roeland. So in a way it was a bad start. I hope they can still achieve something there, but they lost a lot of time. Even Cadel Evans got some problem after that crash. So really dramatic, but yeah, things happen.
Yep, these things happen. It's racing. Just a quick personal comment from you. You went up the Angliru the other day. First of all, have you been up it before as a director, and how would you fancy going up as a rider?
Well, I was up already before a few years ago when it was also very bad weather and we nearly could get up with the car, so I'm wondering how the riders get up. We had special materials. We just had a very, very small gear, about a 36, 29, so you should be able to get up with that, but it's very spectacular. I think it must be beautiful to watch on television, but I think the riders not really liked it. I also saw there was some irregularities, so maybe they should try to work on that and making the roads a bit, let's say, bit more apart from the public, because I think the last boys went even up faster as the first guys. So, but in a way, it's a dramatic climb. It's very mythic, and I'm sure they want to keep it in because, of course, the leaders there want to win on that, and that's why Contador also went everything to go for the win on that stage.
Yeah, you wouldn't have fancied riding it yourself, though.
I think I would rather go down instead of going up, yeah.
I thought you might, yeah. Irregularities, by which we saw a lot of it, a lot of pushing going on. I was amazed at the size of the crowds up there.
There was a lot of crowds, yeah, there was big crowds there. Then, of course, then you have that thing that the irregularities start. Surely also a lot for Spanish riders, because I could see at one moment Cornu was getting up to the leader, Igor Martinez, and he eventually got in his wheel, but the last 3 kilometers just got so much pushed, the Spanish guy, that he just took 45 seconds still on Dominic. So that means that it was a bit sad. But we were already 7 minutes down, so in a way it doesn't matter for classification. But I can imagine if you're there for a top 5 position and you have that, and there's no commissaires there, and you have a sort of organized help going on there, you can at least win 1 minute.
Indeed. Well, thanks for joining us. It's been great to have you on the phone, Hendrik, because today there's not a lot going on. Nice to hear your insights on the Angler as well. Good luck with Greg over the next few days, and good luck with that jersey.
All right, thank you very much, and hope to see you on the podium. Who knows?
Who knows? Who knows? We'll see you there. Bye.
Okay, see you. Bye-bye.
Never struck me as the sort of rider who'd much like riding up the Angler himself, Hendrik Widon.
No, certainly not. He wasn't the rider who liked the climbs at all. He was one of the, the big, the flat rollers, as they say, classics rider. Certainly the hill as well. Well, his big problem was a bike rider.
Yeah.
And we would be more so now.
Cruel. Yes, Hendrik Widon, slightly more rotund than when he was a rider, but that's the way it is. Still not big though. I tell you what, he was having a serious party at the end of the Tour de France with the rest of the boys. They were really letting their hairs out.
And as he said, the Angler, of course, we see that with Valverde and a lot of the riders, they were getting, quite a number of pushes, and it is a huge advantage if you have a push every so often. It gives it a little bit of a recovery and just gets you that little bit extra speed again build up, and the Spanish riders, I suppose, a lot of support for them out there. The surprising thing was we did not have any barriers there. Like in the Tour of France, they would have barriers for most of that climb, but there was no barriers at all, really, relatively speaking, except in the last final kilometre maybe. So it was easy for the spectators to come onto the road and give the riders a push along. And as Hendrik said, if you're right there fighting for a place in the top 10 and you're with the guy who's maybe 8th, and you're fighting to stay with him, he gets pushed and he just goes away from you so easy, it is very annoying.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, yeah. Well, we're talking about the Vuelta a España and riders coming into it and riding themselves into form for the World Championships just next week, just after the Vuelta a España. Some of them going home earlier, some of them staying towards the end. And we were saying that the Vuelta has always been plagued by this the fact that there's always something else coming up afterwards has significant importance. It used to be the Giro d'Italia. In some editions of the Vuelta a España, it's actually been the Tour de France that has come up next, and other people won't come, or they'll come and leave early, having used it just as preparation and doing no serious racing, or some racing and not an awful lot. And I don't know, do you feel shortchanged by that as a viewer? That's interesting. I'm sure in the early days organisers felt a little shortchanged by that. Derek Dahl, writing in on Eurosport Cycling at hotmail.fr, says any consideration have been given to the 3 major tours being held on a rotational basis. I'd never even thought of that. That's an interesting concept. Sean, what do you think of that? Say the Tour de France being in July one year, then being in September the next, and then being in May the following year.
Well, yes,
interesting.
It would be interesting, but go and suggest it also, and they'll tell us where to go very quickly, because they have got prime spot. July, it's just a perfect time. People can get ready. Riders have a number of months to get ready. You do not have to do the beginning of season very seriously, but as you approach July, you can build up to it and do quite a lot of very nice races. So they have the magnificent advantage of being at the right time of year, and that's why the Tour of France have grown extraordinarily as well. It's got so strong strong because of that date. And you know, everything is going forward. People on holidays, so much people from all over Europe on holidays, and not only in Europe but from all over, you know, the world really in the past number of years come to France for the holidays and taking the Tour de France. So it's, you know, it's plus all the way for the organisers of the Tour de France.
That's the big problem, of course, isn't it? That it's not a World Series, so to speak. That is essentially what the Pro Tour wanted to be, a World Series. It's organised by individual companies. ASO organise the Tour de France. You know, Unipublic were organising this race here, the Vuelta España, and they both have their own agendas as companies themselves, as entities themselves. If it was a World Series, I suppose you could alternate it, but as you say, the ASO, the Amaury Sports Organisation, are not going to want to change their prime spot in July, unfortunately. But it's an interesting idea. I've never really even considered it. Having heard Hendrik Udont on the programme just now, Amy writes in and saying, the angler, how difficult really is it, in layman's terms? Can anybody, i.e. a club cyclist like myself, go up and still be alive at the summit? It's all about gearing, I think. It is incredibly hard. If you look at 23%, that's almost 1 in 4. Almost 1 in 4 at its steepest parts, and that's for a fairly sustained amount of time. Bearing in mind, of course, that it comes at the end of a long day. And it was a long day, wasn't it, Sean? It wasn't just, you know, 50, 60 kilometres and then the climb. It was coming at the end of 150k.
Yes, and that is, yes, the problem if you race seriously during the day and you come to the climb. You know, the body is starting to get weak, and that's when climbs really get difficult. And then, you know, you have to go up the climb at full bore, give it your 100%. And it is, you know, certainly a majorly difficult climb. But as you say, the gearing is so important, and as you know, for a club cyclist, that's what it's all about. If you have the right gears, first of all, and depend on you know, what you do. If you just go to the climb and do it, well, then it's not major difficult. But if you have to ride 200 k's beforehand, then it's a real challenge. And also depend on, you know, if you just ride up it and, you know, give it 90%, and you know, that's also a great advantage if you're just riding in a leisure event. But when you're on the river, as they say in cycling, you're trying to hang in with guys who are better climbers, then it's, you know, big suffering.
Yeah, and a lot of these guys using, you know, gearing akin to mountain bikes, you know, 34 in a chain ring, or 36 and a 20, anything between 28, 29, some had 30 tooth sprocket at the back. Somebody sent me a lovely picture actually of Carlos Sastre rounding a corner with his 53 plate on the front for the big ring, and a 34 inner for the smaller one. And as our colleague Graham Jones has said many times, this, and you said it as well, Sean, the advance in equipment these days means that you can do that sort of thing, and makes riding these sort of very, very ultra steep climbs much more well, not accessible, but they can actually do it. You wouldn't have been able to do that sort of climb maybe 20, 25 years ago, just purely because the equipment wouldn't allow you the spread of gears now.
Well, of course, you know, a number of years ago when you had only the 42 inner ring, then of course you'd have to have an awful big sprocket on the rear. You'd have a dinner plate on the rear, really. So, and you know, the difference between the sprockets would be huge as well. Where now it's, you know, much improvement, so it makes it that much easier.
Back live on stage 16 here on the Vuelta España. They're running in towards Zamora today, 186.3 kilometers, and it will end up in a sprint today. Quickstep, Milram on the front, also Van Avermaet's team. Ceylon Slaughter have been working there as well. They're just gradually working their way towards Zamora. The average speed pretty low for today. We heard from Hendrik Udont, we could have probably ridden, Sean and I and Hendrik could have probably ridden in the peloton today. Their average speed over the first 2 hours was just a shade under 28 kilometers an hour. They've got 2 guys out ahead, Walter Pedraza from Tinkoff Credit Systems and Jose Rezendo from the Andalusia Carasur squad.
And looking down at the results there of the points classement in the Vuelta, I'm just looking back at the results over many years, and Henrik was saying for Greg Van Avermaet not to take it would be certainly, you know, a great achievement for him. But you have to go back a long way. As Van den Broek in '99 was one of the Belgian winners, and then you have to go back to '82, Guido van Kalster for the points classement. And surprised because the Belgians, of course, you know, always good sprinters, but very few names there in the classement of the outright winner of the points classement.
The Belgians, of course, have a long and illustrious history in the Vuelta a España. The winner of the very first Vuelta a España was a Belgian, Delure, Gustave Delure. He also won the following year as well in 1935 and 36, and his brother, by the way, was runner-up in 1936. So the Belgians have had a long association with this race. They were one of the... Well, it's not all together yet, Sean. They're all quite a bit scrappy work. Does that look like... I think it's Weidkus, isn't it? Or is it Bettini? Difficult to tell. Bettini, I think, at the front of that little group there, looking back over his shoulders to where the Quick-Step boys are, and it was a little bit strung out.
Yes, and that little kick-up, of course, I think, you know, when Fletcher went to the front, he stretched it out a bit, but they're all back in position, as we can see a number of the quick steps here. And Bettini looking about to see the position of Bowlen. There's certainly, you know, 5 riders here from the quick step all in a line, so it's looking good at the moment. But Fletcher, you know, why did he ride off the front?
I've not a clue.
A lot of the time, you know, we question his tactics because he is, you know, he's a good rider, very powerful. When he goes in the attack, he can, you know, cause a lot of problems. But his attack, sometimes you wonder, you know, in the position he's in, why is he going in the attack from there?
Yes, indeed. It's Andrea Tonti at the front at the moment, with Paolo Bettini in the World Champions jersey just behind him. Then Tozzato, and then Walter Valens, and then Tom Bonen, bringing Van Avermaet up towards the front. Now, you can see him in the blue jersey of points leader. He's not actually the leader, but he is the best placed, or the next best placed man, along with Alejandro Valverde. He's got that jersey on his shoulders. He's fighting to get the wheel of Tom Bonen at the moment. He's sort of a little bit boxed in now, gets into a better line. He's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 back at the moment on the right-hand side of your screen. And that long line of quick-step riders. They're under the 4 to go banner. They're almost at the 3 to go banner. They're working pretty well at the moment, the quick-steps. Here we go, around this roundabout. Keep it all in line. It's certainly not at flat-out pace at the moment. They've got another roundabout to come down this Carretera de Tordesillas, 3 kilometers.
Riders at both sides here.
Well, that's unfortunate. They're all now looking at each other going, well, how did we get here? Let's hope that nobody from...
hopefully it's open at the other end.
Yeah, absolutely. That looks like Mate Jurko who's got in there, is it? That isn't Van Avermaet, surely. No, he's too far up. I think it's Jurko in his purple jersey. He's got through, thank goodness. Bazayev, I can see now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 back in the sky blue jersey of road race champion of Kazakhstan. Now Paolo Bettini takes it up there underneath the 3 to go banner. They're at about 2.5 kilometers to go. This is the nasty bend. The one nasty bend, and all safely through. It's not narrow enough to cause a problem at the moment, unless anybody decides to step out from the side of the road. Still, Paolo Bettini working at the front. Behind, still strung out, are David... oh no, it's Kevin Van Impe next, I think, in line, if I'm not mistaken. So Bettini leads round, then Van Impe, then Tozzato, then Wouter Valens, who had a bit of an excursion down the mountain the other day, thankfully unhurt when he went over the Arnco barriers, and then Tom Bonen. Crédit Agricole fighting hard to get their man up there. They're riding this train fairly well at the moment, and they'll have to get a little bit closer, I think, if Eno wants to do something. Eno, I think, in the yellow shoes and the green and white of Crédit Agricole. Leonardo Duque sandwiched in behind the quick-step train. Pulls off, comes Paolo Bettini. Now pushing hard at the front is Van Impe. And they're riding this train well. They're doing the job perfectly at the moment. Under the 1 kilometer to go banner. It's Duque.
Pozzato.
Pozzato. Tozzato is going to be now on the front of the train, then Wouter Valens, then Tom Bonen, and then that isn't Pozzato in there, that's too tall for him. This is Liquid Gas Rider sandwiched in there. It might be. Leonardo Duque in the white and red of Cofidis now, Azan Bazayev coming up towards the front. He's got Thomas Weitkus right behind him. Bazayev is going for a long one and pulls off. Now, who is he trying to bring up towards the front? Weitkus, I would imagine. He's a very powerful man. Hitting the front now is Wouter Valens, the man from Oudenaarde in Belgium. Sebastian Eno coming alongside Tom Bonen. Eno pulls out to the right-hand side of the road. Bonen has got the left-hand side. It's got Pozzato right behind him. Pushing hard, it looks like Tom Bonen's going to get a very easy victory in the end. Worked perfectly, the lead-out train. Van Avermaet was about 25 back in the points jersey. He'll get another couple of points, but not a great deal. Where is his nearest rival, Alejandro Valverde? Heinrich Hausler, I think, was fairly close to Tom Bonen, but in the end, unchallenged. Sean did a perfect job, the lead-out boys.
Yes, well, they were, very much in numbers there and took them to the, perfect position. And Tozzato, who we see they're doing a very good job. And that was Pozzato there from the Liquid Gas.
Yep.
And getting pretty close, not that far off, but Bonen very much in control. But I think the team did, the perfect job today.
Well, we'll have to leave fairly shortly because it took such a long time to get here for the train today. Long time. But is that Michael Delage, I think, is possibly trying to come through for Francis de Jure, and Hausler coming through for third spot. Tom Bonen, though, takes another victory here in the Vuelta a España, and quite convincingly in the end. It does look like Delage to me. Has the time to sit up. Pozzato throwing his bike at the line. Heinrich Hausler gets third. Delage indeed gets fourth. Then Thomas Weitkus, big powerful sprinter. A big powerful guy. Ruler can turn in a decent sprint as he does there. Takes fifth. And then Usov throwing his bike at the line. Just behind Coldo Fernandez. Santamburgio. Pozzato looking very lean. He's slimmed down a pretty good amount on this Vuelta. But a win for Tom Bonen, unchallenged really. Nobody had the power to come around. The former world champion, winner of Paris-Roubaix, winner of the Tour of Flanders, top sprinter, and gunning for another world title in Varese next week. And his teammate, the current world champion, will also be doing that, but for a different country. But a win for Bonen today. The class of the field, nobody could touch him. Pozzato coming close, but as we say, no cigar. Heinrich Hausler coming quickly up on the outside for Germany, and Gerolsteiner. Michael Delage from Francis de Jure just looked over to the left to see Heinrich Hausler coming at him. Probably could have kept his head down and gone. Thomas Weitkus for Astana, and then Coldo Fernandez, the first of the Spaniards. This is the top 20. Eric Zabel back in 11th spot. Actually got himself in the wrong place. Leonardo Duque, who was sitting pretty at one point, going backwards rather than forwards. I think a little boxed out. Here's the general classification then. After the end of stage 16, Contador still 117 ahead of Leipheimer. Sastre at 3:41, then Mosquera, Gesink, Valverde at 6 minutes. Rodriguez at 6:11, Martinez at 8:56, then Moncloutier, and then Oliver Zorg at 10 minutes and 1 second. No change on that score. And nobody in this group either making a difference at all. But a win for Tom Bonen. He said he wanted to come today. He was the overwhelming favourite, and he proved why.